Why do two college-educated adults, with no kids and no debt, need four jobs just to afford a two-bedroom apartment in America? That's not a riddle. That's our real life. And we're not talking about luxury here. No ocean view, no rooftop gym, just a tiny, aging two-bedroom in Santa Cruz, California, with mold in the bathroom and a dishwasher that hasn't worked since the Bush administration. Rent? $4,200 a month. Yeah, you heard that right. And we weren't living large. We were surviving small. When we signed that lease, I remember Dan and me wife squeezing my hand and whispering, "We'll make it work." That was 9 months ago. Since then, we've traded weekends for extra shifts, dinners for cheap takeout, and date nights for spreadsheets. Four jobs, two people, zero breathing room. That's the math of our American dream now. And this is how it all started. When Danny got offered the teaching job in Santa Cruz, we thought it was a breakthrough. She'd spent years bouncing between underpaid part-time gigs and was finally getting a full-time position with benefits and a classroom of her own. We celebrated, told our families, packed up our place in Modesto, and drove west with this fuzzy vision of coastal life, coffee shops, cool mornings, a short bike ride to work. But the moment we started apartment hunting, reality snapped back hard. Every place we toured felt like a punchline. Studios going for $3,000, one bedrooms with barely any natural light asking $3,600. And then there was the place we ended up choosing, a second-floor walk-up that smelled like old carpet and desperation, but it had two bedrooms, which we figured could be a home office and a future nursery. Optimism is dangerous like that. We signed the lease because we were tired, stressed, and out of options. The numbers didn't work, but we convinced ourselves they would. Her salary was about $54,000 a year. After taxes, she brought home just under $4,000 a month. That was gone before the 10th rent, utilities, loan payments. So I started freelancing again, taking on branding projects, social media gigs, anything I could get. Then I signed up to drive Uber on evenings and weekends. Danny picked up after-school tutoring sessions and started teaching ESL online for 2 hours every morning before school. Four jobs. 40 fingers typing, gripping, hustling, stretching. Still not enough. The hardest part? We weren't being irresponsible. We weren't spending on vacations or gadgets. We were scraping by, just to keep a roof over our heads. I remember one night, after I'd finished a 10-hour day of design and rideshare, I came home to find Danny asleep at the kitchen table. She was still wearing her school ID badge. Her laptop was open, half-graded essays scattered across the table. I didn't wake her. I just stood there and looked at her. The person I loved most in the world was burning out in front of me so we could afford a mediocre apartment in a city we barely had time to enjoy. I microwaved some leftovers, sat down next to her, and stared at our shared Google Calendar. Color-coded chaos. Her name in green, mine in blue, tiny blocks of white space where sleep was supposed to be. This wasn't living, this was some twisted endurance test. And yet every time we talked about leaving, about finding somewhere cheaper, somewhere slower, we hesitated, because there was this stubborn hope inside us that it would get better, that we'd adjust. That maybe if we just worked a little harder, things would ease up. But they didn't, they got tighter. And that's the thing about four jobs: you don't have time to breathe, let alone regroup. You just keep going, because stopping means falling behind. And in a place like Santa Cruz, falling behind means eviction. We weren't thriving. We were calculating. Every bill, every grocery run, every tank of gas. And no matter how smart we tried to play it, we always ended up in the red. By month 4, we stopped checking the budget. It was too depressing. We just focused on surviving 1 week at a time, hoping the next paycheck would be enough to patch the hole from the last. And every time we passed by the beach, just a few blocks from our place, we looked at the ocean and realized we hadn't touched the sand in months. We lived near the coast, but we weren't living coastal. We were working through it, and we weren't the only ones. Every neighbor had a side hustle. Every coffee shop barista had a master's degree. Everyone was smiling through the grind, pretending they weren't exhausted. That's how it works here. You hide the burnout until it breaks you. And it nearly did. We tried to keep it together. We told ourselves it was just a rough patch, that the schedule would get easier once we adjusted. But it didn't. Instead, life shrunk down into a series of survival habits. Danny stopped buying lunch at work and packed the same turkey sandwich every single day. I canceled Spotify, Netflix, and every subscription that wasn't directly tied to our jobs. We split one car to save on gas. We switched to a cheaper phone plan, gave up weekend coffee runs, and started eating rice and eggs 3 nights a week. Not because we wanted to, but because we had to. I remember one Sunday night, sitting in the laundry room downstairs with a roll of quarters in my hand, and realizing we'd reached a point where even doing laundry required negotiation. One load, not two. Skip the dryer, hang it up at home. And yet, despite all that, we were still falling short. There was this moment week 7 or 8 when we sat down at the kitchen table to do the numbers and realized we were behind by $360. It wasn't like we'd splurged. It was just how the month played out. Rent cleared, then Danny's student loan, then groceries, then gas, then a surprise dentist bill from when she cracked a molar eating day-old toast. Boom. Negative balance. We looked at each other in silence, not because we were shocked, but because we didn't have anything left to say. That night, we didn't fight. We didn't even speak. We just sat next to each other, staring at our shared checking account on our cracked iPhone screen. You know what the worst part is? It wasn't just the money. It was how the money bled into everything else. Our patience, our sleep, our relationship. We used to talk for hours about books, movies, dreams, stupid stuff like opening a bookstore cafe someday. Now our conversations were almost always about bills, hours, shift changes, car repairs, or whether we could afford to replace the one frying pan we had that kept peeling into our eggs. The stress didn't come all at once. It wore us down inch by inch. Danny started getting migraines. I developed insomnia. We stopped saying, "I love you" out loud. Not because we didn't mean it, but because we were too tired to remember. I snapped at her once over a missing sock and instantly regretted it. But the damage was done. That's what financial pressure does. It doesn't just squeeze your wallet. It squeezes your joy, your energy, your basic sense of self. It makes you feel like no matter how hard you try, you're still failing. And failure is a heavy thing to carry when you're already holding up an entire life with both hands. I think what really broke me, though, was the birthday. My birthday. Danny had planned something small, just a beach picnic, nothing fancy. She even found a Groupon for a little seafood shack and saved up to buy me a slice of key lime pie, my favorite. But that morning, she got called in to sub for a sick teacher, and I got a last-minute freelance request from a big client that we couldn't afford to turn down. We both canceled. No beach, no pie, just another shift. That night, she brought home a gas station cupcake with a candle she pulled from an old junk drawer. We sat on the floor of our apartment, eating that cupcake in silence, and I just remember thinking, this isn't how people should live. This isn't what we imagined when we talked about building a life together. We were grateful to have jobs, sure, but 4 jobs to keep a roof over our heads? That's not resilience. That's desperation with good branding. I started talking to coworkers, quietly, and realized we weren't alone. One guy at the design firm commuted 90 minutes each way because rent was cheaper inland. A woman Danny worked with lived with her sister and shared a bedroom with her 2 kids. Everyone was playing financial Jenga, pulling from one part of their life just to keep the rest from collapsing. And nobody talked about it publicly. There was shame in the struggle, even though the system was clearly broken. Rent kept rising. Wages didn't. And every housing solution the city proposed came too late or with too many strings. We thought about moving. We did. But every time we searched for something cheaper, the numbers still didn't work. Either it was too far, or too small, or already taken. So we stayed. Not because we wanted to, because we didn't have a choice. And that's the trap, isn't it? You work harder, try smarter, give up more and still feel stuck in the same place. We weren't lazy, we weren't wasteful, we were exhausted, but we stayed, because leaving felt like starting over. And honestly, we were too tired to start anything anymore. I wish I could say things eventually got better, that we caught a break, that one of our side hustles blew up, or that rent magically dropped, or that some policy kicked in and made life livable again. But that's not what happened. What happened was we learned to function while running on empty. We adapted, we automated, we stopped asking if this was normal, and just assumed it had to be. Because everyone around us was doing the same thing. Sleep became a luxury. Connection became a calendar item. Joy turned into something we promised we'd get back to once things settled down. I remember the morning Danny forgot what day it was. She woke up, grabbed her keys, and started getting dressed before realizing it was Saturday. She broke down in tears, not because of the mistake, but because she was too tired to remember her own life. That's when I knew this wasn't just about rent anymore. It was about what 4 jobs were taking from us, quietly, day by day. They took our time, our laughter, our ability to feel rested, to feel young, to feel like our lives belonged to us. And for what? A 2-bedroom apartment with paper-thin walls and a sink that constantly leaked no matter how many times we called maintenance? Some nights, I'd look around that space and wonder how we'd let it shrink our whole world. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, no yard, no view, no quiet. But we stayed, because starting over felt even scarier than staying stuck. Until one day, we cracked. It was a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in traffic, late for a client meeting, and Danny called me sobbing from the school parking lot. She'd just gotten her paycheck, and even with all the tutoring and extra hour sit still wasn't enough. Rent was due in 4 days, and we were short again. Not by much, maybe $200. But it felt like the last straw. We'd given this place everything. All our time, all our energy. And it was still asking for more. That night, we sat down. Really sat down and had the conversation we'd been avoiding for months. What are we doing? What are we trying to prove? Who are we killing ourselves for? And when would we finally admit, this isn't working? The next week, we broke the lease, paid the penalty, packed our things in silence. There was no dramatic blow-up, no moment of cinematic freedom, just quiet, tired resolve. We moved inland an hour and a half away, where rent was almost half. We still work hard. Danny still teaches. I still freelance. But now we share dinners again. We go for walks, we sit on the porch and breathe. We even made it to the beach last month just to feel the ocean, just to remember we're alive. Looking back, I don't regret trying. We were proud. We wanted to make it work. But there's a line between determination and destruction, and 4 jobs taught us exactly where that line was. If you're listening to this and you feel like you're drowning, just know it's not your fault. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're in a system that keeps asking for more while giving you less. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't pushing through, it's stepping away. We needed 4 jobs to afford a 2 bedroom in Santa Cruz, but what we really needed was a life. And we're finally starting to get that back.